hearing yesterday, Mr. Comptroller, you were asked if you believe discrimination exists. You said that because you've never personally observed it, you can't say, but you've had, quote, friends from the inner city tell you it exists and you believe them. When you were asked if you've ever read about discrimination, you said that you did, but that writers are only correct about half the time, and then you said you don't read newspapers. These are unbelievable statements for any adult in America, especially one that took an oath of office like you did. But let me ask you a couple of questions. Does hiring through the old boys network serve as a headwind for women and minorities, whether in banking or government?
My response to that would be is I wouldn't support those kind of activities. I think there are equal employment opportunity laws in this land that people adhere to, and I'm not aware of any old boy network that I associated with the banking industry. So I personally have not observed that activity, and I would also say, to answer your question, if there was a network like that, I wouldn't support that. And
well, you can't go into, I know you don't read newspapers, you couldn't go onto the New York Times and say, this is the good old boys discriminating network. But let me give you an example. When you and Secretary Mnuchin and the rest of the One West board signed the consent order with regulators, we know about all the foreclosures that your bank did, signed the consent order over foreclosure misconduct. Your 9-member board, I could read the names, I won't bother, they were all men. I don't know if you set out to say, I'm only going to hire men, but I got to think the old boys network that you ended up being part of would have something to do with it. So it begs the question to me that you've never seen discrimination in your mind, but some friends from the inner city told you there was discrimination, so you believe them even though you only believe half of what you read in the newspaper. And then you're saying that you never saw any discrimination in hiring, even though coincidentally all 10 or all 9 of the people on your board were men. I don't know if they were all white men. I assume, I don't make assumptions, but I know they're all men. So does that not suggest to you maybe there is an old boys network in hiring, and that maybe people that look like you and me and Schatz and Van Hollen and Jones and Toomey and Rounds, that we might have an advantage in hiring because we know people that look like us, and that's who usually gets hired for banks?
Yeah,
Did that ever occur to you?
First of all, I appreciate you do recognize that I signed that consent order right after I joined the bank, and I am proud to say that we diversified that board under my leadership. So I don't think it stayed in the format that you described.
But they got there, these 10 men. I'm not saying you did it. I'm saying you don't seem to recognize that discrimination exists because you've never seen discrimination.
What I said is that under my leadership, we diversified that board. And so that would give you an indication why I was there, the actions that I took. There are tools, trainings, and laws in place to avoid discrimination. There's lots of evidence of inequity in the world. I would tell you, just because I haven't personally experienced it, that I'm not saying it's not.
But no. You didn't say, you've said you didn't personally, you said you've never seen it. But some friends in the inner city.
No, that's not true. I mean, as being part of a institution or a bank over the course of my career, there's been instances amongst employee groups.
That gives me a little more confidence.
They get referred to HR. There's investigations. There's corrective action. What I was saying was I personally have never experienced it.
Well, I think you said you personally didn't see it, but
well, then let me correct the record.
Okay, I think you said it a number of times. Why should, with your, I'm sorry to say it this way, but your insensitivity generally to these issues, just evidenced by your response.
That is not true.
Well, insensitivity, I read your testimony in the House, but let me go on this. So fundamentally, why should the public trust you to overhaul the Community Reinvestment Act, a product of the civil rights movement meant to address generations of segregation and exclusion? If you don't seem really, I mean, you just don't even seem certain that discrimination exists. You, in response to Congressman Capuano and Congressman Cleaver, you didn't ever say, yeah, discrimination exists, I know it exists. You had to come to the conclusion it exists because a, quote, friend in the inner city told you it exists. So why should we trust you, the public, the Congress, the civil rights community, to address generations of segregation and exclusion by overhauling the Community Reinvestment Act the way it should be overhauled?
Yeah.
Convince me.
Thank you very much for that question. I think if you look at my top 3 agendas, 2 of those top 3 are redefining CRA and small ticket lending, which go right to the core of what you're describing and the people in America that need the most help. I'm all about expanding CRA into the low to moderate income areas across America. And small ticket lending, when we took banks out of that space that offered a fair alternative to people, people ended up with check cashers, payday lenders, liquor stores. That's not the source where people can go and get quality bank products and get back into mainstream banking. So 2 or 3 of my core agenda items is focused right on those people you're describing.
So if you, okay, I hear you. If you can't just directly say to a congressional hearing, discrimination exists, will you make this promise to? You are arguing now that you say, yes, you recognize that it does exist. Will you promise us to move forward on a CRA overhaul only if you have the full support of the civil rights community? Only if you have the full support of the civil rights community. I understand you said you're going to do an overhaul. Overhaul can mean a lot of things. It can be dereg, it can be a lot of
Be able to
things.
provide us feedback through the ANPR, and they will be at the table discussing.
I understand they'll be at the table, but some people are at the table and ignored by others at the table. Will you commit to this committee that if there is not unity, if there's not consensus in the civil rights community, you will not move that direction on CRA overhaul?
They will be at the table having discussions like all parties involved in this.
That's the most you're going to commit.
I stand by my answer.
Okay.